like to welcome everybody to our recap of Week 5 in the college football season. Another successful week for us. Um, keep looking impotent on offense. We'll keep making money. That was for sure. That was definitely a great call on your part this past weekend. And as you go, sometimes you get lulls in the year. Sometimes things don't go your way. Where you could have been on a roll the past couple weeks, like we started out really hot. We're still doing well, but this is where your management of your bankroll really comes into play. If you're going to be a professional gambler and a sports bettor, even more importantly, you got to understand your bankroll. And there are going to be times where you're gonna go dry. There are going to be times where you don't, you're just breaking even. And there are going to be times when you're hot. There might be a time or two when you're cold. But it's that bankroll management. Never letting that money burn a hole in your pocket once you win it. Keeping it, budgeting yourself out, knowing where you should be at. And that way you'll always have money in your pocket. You'll always be able to head to that window right away and make that bet that you want to make a bet on. And your bankroll isn't going to come up dry. But if you're trying to play the feast and famine game, you'll run out of bankroll in a hurry. And that's kind of the lesson that people have to learn as we're going along. Because like we started out really hot. And now we've been about 500 last couple weeks here, maybe even a little bit below 500 the last couple weeks. And what this really tells me is your bankroll management now comes into play. We're way up on the year. We're having a fantastic year. But if you're not handling your bankroll properly, it's times like this where you can be having a good year and all of a sudden you're bust. So just managing your money properly will help you move along. Now with that, in the recap, first game we want to go to was a tough one for me. I actually had the lean on Arkansas this way. I had Arkansas minus 17 and a half.
Plus 17.
Or plus 17 and a half. I wouldn't have bet a minus 17 and a half.
No.
Plus 17 and a half against Bama. And boy, when this game was 28-23, I was going, woo! And Bryce Young was out, and I'm thinking, man, this is in the bag. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't. And that's just how good Alabama is. They, even with a backup quarterback, I should know better than anybody. Alabama is just going to have more studs behind the neck. They lose one, they got another one. You got to go to 4 and 5 deep. When you think about it, Mac Jones was number 4 on that depth chart at one point in time. Now he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. So that's what that tells me. Congratulations to Alabama. They not only won, but they covered. They covered with a backup quarterback, and what can I say? Arkansas, I thought KJ would do a little bit better job and he did give him a little bit of a hard time, but just not enough. That Alabama offense was better, and I thought the Arkansas defense would be a little bit better than what they were. But bottom line is, it was an L for me. What'd you have on this one, T?
So this was no play for me. I made Alabama minus 17, so basically right on the number. It really came down to just momentum swings. Bryce went down. Milroe moved the ball a little bit, scored right away. Then Alabama went in a lull, and Arkansas went on a major comeback, made it one score. And then all of a sudden, Jalen Milroe broke like a 75-yard run to get it down to like the 2-yard line. And after that, Gibbs in the fourth quarter had 2 huge runs of 72 and 76 for touchdowns. And that's how you cover a number. You go from one score to you've got 3 runs down the stretch of 70 plus. Yeah. Milroe's run didn't directly get in the end zone, but indirectly it did because they scored on that drive.
Yep.
3 long runs like that to put up 21 points in an instant.
Bama has.
And Arkansas's defense just struggles. That is their weak point. Arkansas running the ball was still good. Back had over 100, I want to say, without looking at the box score right in front of me. And Alabama's Alabama.
Yeah, they're good.
They're good. And going forward, they're still going to be good. That defense is still loaded. The wide receivers are younger, but are starting to come around a little bit and get a little bit more separation.
Yeah.
Because none of those guys, for the most part, have had to play because they've had NFL talent in front of them.
Yeah.
So they're getting their first real prime time game snaps, where they're being relied on to help move the ball. But hey, shoot, Arkansas, they had like 10 more first downs than Alabama did in this game.
Yeah.
And you lose by 23.
Yeah. Yep. Alabama definitely showed some big play capability, and that's a good win on the road for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a quality win on the road, and we'll be talking about their next game in our next week when we open up with what plays we're going to have for the next week. But congratulations to Alabama.
Yeah.
Definitely a team, like I said before the season started, I thought they'd be undefeated, and they still haven't shown me anything that will prevent that from happening, being undefeated going into the SEC championship game. They've got some games coming up, but
and if depending on how the AC sprain in Bryce's throwing shoulder would heal, I'm not overly concerned with Milroe, but when you have to play the likes of, I want to say they've got Tennessee in 2 weeks.
Oh, they've
when
got some
you play
games
some of the
up.
top level teams
they
in
got
the SEC.
A&M this weekend.
Yeah, but A&M ain't top level in the SEC.
Well,
I mean, they're not.
don't tell A&M that.
No, I will tell A&M that. They're not. They can't move the ball offensively, and their defense isn't very good. But we'll get into that in our game breakdown because that ticket's already in my pocket.
Yeah.
But regarding this recap still, Alabama, fact of the matter is they're good.
Yep, I agree. Next game on our recap edition here on the HRO Sports Betting Podcast, we got Kentucky at Ole Miss. Heck of a ball game. We had a play on this one. We really liked Ole Miss -4 against Kentucky. And it was close. It was a tight one the whole way. And an opportunity for even Kentucky to win it. And they came up short. Nice play by the Ole Miss defense to save the game. Not enough to get us on the spread. Was a little disappointed in what I thought Ole Miss could do in this one. Although I really like Kentucky, I just really think that this shows the difference between a middle of the pack team in the SEC West versus an upper tier team in the SEC East. And while Ole Miss is a top 20 team in the nation, it's just too bad they aren't in the East and can't have a chance to play Georgia for the SEC East title over there. But that's kind of how I looked at it. Nice win for Ole Miss. Just didn't quite get us to the window. What are your thoughts, T?
Yeah, I made this game 8. So I bet it when it dropped at 4. I liked where the line moved. Gave me some value with the closing line. Just didn't quite get there.
Yeah.
I mean, had the ball in the red zone. Was it first and goal at the 4? Couldn't score. Got no points out of that.
Yeah.
That possession changes the outcomes when it comes to against the spread. So
I agree.
It was a fun game to watch. I mean, Kentucky had some specifically fumbling issues down the stretch. A couple fumbles.
Yeah.
I mean, credit. Both teams are good. I think Ole Miss, I think I've got them as the second best team behind Alabama in the West.
I got them a little further down, but that's...
what do you have ahead of them?
Well, I had ahead of them. I had Arkansas and LSU, or not LSU, Texas A&M ahead of them.
To start the year, Texas A&M ain't ahead of them.
Yeah,
and even Arkansas, their defense is just not good.
Yeah.
It's just when you've got a bad defense like that, it's gonna be tough to compete in the SEC.
No, I agreed.
But yeah, this was a play. Didn't quite get to the window.
Yeah.
Took that one on the chin a little bit, and you move on.
Yeah. And speaking of moving on, that's our segue to head to our third game that we're going to take a look at, which is Michigan at Iowa. Pretty much went the way we thought it was going to go. Michigan winning 27-14. Great call on your part once again, announcing that we're going to take that Iowa team total under. Anything under 14.5, and I think what did we get, 15.5 on that one?
Yeah, it came out 15.5, which is what the implied number was when we were talking about it.
Yeah.
I thought it'd come anywhere between 15.5 to 14.5.
Yeah.
And it came in at the 15.5 number, so that was a 2-unit play for us.
Yeah.
Good W to at least in the plays that we gave out for free to go 500 on, so you're only losing some juice.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we had other stuff that we
Yeah.
bet on that I'm happy with our weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah, this game went just about
Yeah.
as good as you could expect.
Yeah, Iowa's a tough place to play, especially for top 10 teams.
Top 5 teams.
Top five
Yeah.
teams have gone there to die, and
Yep.
Michigan avoided that. I give them all the credit in the world. I'm actually surprised Iowa put 14 on the board.
I mean,
So,
they moved the ball decently through
relatively
the
well,
air,
yeah.
which was
It's
kind of
kinda
surprising.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. But Michigan just they're moving up on my rankings. They are slow. I'm slowly starting to come around to Michigan.
yeah, I
You've
was on
had them the
all
whole
year.
way.
Yeah.
I still like Penn State. Michigan State for me is really declined.
Disappointing.
They've been disappointing, but getting back to Michigan, nice win for Harbaugh and the boys in blue, and I look forward to them providing us with some real good games in the not too distant
Yeah.
future. So with that, we're also going to keep riding that Iowa under train.
Yeah,
But
well,
moving on to the next game, we've got NC State at Clemson. This was 6.5, ends up 30-20. And Clemson looked good. DJ Uyunglele, once again, he did a nice job in this game. Watching him play, he made some
Yeah.
big-time throws. He really was poised in the pocket. I was impressed with him. He's really growing into his own, and that's bad news for the rest of the ACC. When at the beginning of the year, myself included, we looked at Clemson being vulnerable. Now Clemson could be part of 6 teams, I think, that could really make the life of the conference football playoff committee
Yeah.
living he double toothpicks, because they're going to present some problems, and you're going to have some really good teams. And this might be the year where, instead of hoping that they can find a number 14 to kind of slot in and get hammered by the reigning SEC champion, this year you might have as many as 6 teams with a rightful claim to get in. And I mean a rightful claim, not Cincinnati begging that they should be in as a non-power 5. But getting back to it, Clemson looked good. They're playing well, and if Dabo can keep his boys playing like that,
Yeah.
they're gonna have a legitimate claim on one of those 4 spots. How are you looking at this one, T?
So I made this 6.5, so no play for me. As far as the game goes, I thought Clemson's defense looked good. Leary wasn't quite as sharp as he would have needed to be to beat a Clemson team like this. DJ, as you mentioned, has been better the last couple of weeks after a little bit of a slow start. And just going to kind of echo what you just talked about. Clemson's schedule, they just beat the 2 toughest teams on their schedule.
Yep.
Wake Forest and NC State. They beat the other top teams in the ACC.
Yep.
Their remaining schedule gets easier. Don't give me like Notre Dame or Clemson. Clemson is gonna, unless they drop kick one, which
No,
you can
they
always
can.
lose.
Yeah.
They should be undefeated going into the ACC title game, and in which case, Clemson will then not just be playing for an ACC title; they will be playing for a spot in the college football playoff. Because
Very
an
well could.
undefeated Clemson team is in. They
Yeah.
get in.
They very well could be in, without question.
And depending on what happens in the Big 12 with the likes of, in Oklahoma State, I think is still undefeated.
Yeah.
In the Pac-12 with USC. But what this does do, I think, is because Clemson has a good chance to run the table, teams like a Utah that has that early loss at the Swamp makes it a lot. They're going to need some help now. Just their quality wins that they'll have on their schedule probably won't be enough, but that's kind of getting off track a little bit.
I agree, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But heading into our next game, we had Oklahoma State that we talked about at Baylor. Oklahoma State wins this one easy, 46-25.
Still get no respect.
Yeah, kind of surprised me a little bit. I really like the Baylor squad, and the bottom line is they just got the job done. They won easy. I'm one of those guys that was saying there's no respect for Oklahoma State. I look at them, they're a Big 12 team that just, I don't know what they're going to have to do to impress me, but this win was impressive. So on paper, this one was impressive. But I still think Oklahoma State has to be undefeated at the end of the year in order to get to the college football playoffs. So
yeah, I would agree.
And quite honestly, I would have said that about any of the Big 12 schools. In order for them to make it, they'd really have to be undefeated. But getting back to it, nice win over a very good Baylor squad. So what were your thoughts on this one?
So I made this game Baylor -6. So I was this was one of the plays that I was looking at as a potential play for me. Didn't end up getting to the window on it, mainly because to this point, Oklahoma State hadn't played anybody.
Yeah.
They had played some cupcakes. They'd had a couple games where they started a little bit slow. So it was more so just too much unknown surrounding the Cowboys squad that I just didn't want to touch this specific one. I mean, Spencer Saunders, depending on how you led the team in rushing. He was efficient, like 20 of 29.
Yeah.
They didn't have a ton through the air, yardage-wise, but still an efficient number. They won.
Yeah.
And they'll have some games on their schedule looking at it. They got to go to TCU in a couple weeks. Kansas, who thought going to Kansas would be a win that... It'd be a good win on your
win,
yeah,
and a good win on your resume.
And they got to go to Oklahoma in a rivalry game at the end of the year. So they have some games that if they win, and then if they would win the Big 12, depending on who they would play, probably a second time, they'd have enough quality wins depending on everybody else. But I agree, they have to be undefeated in order to get in.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. So with that, we did not have a play on that one, but. Team to watch, Oklahoma State moving forward.
Yeah, we'll see if they keep winning.
Excuse me. The next game that we had up on the slate for last week was Wake Forest at FSU. Opened -4.5 and 64.5. Jumped up to -5.5 and over 68. Wake Forest winning 31-21. And, that Wake Forest game, that loss to Clemson, I think is just going to haunt this Wake Forest program.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Because they're good. This Wake Forest team, I really like it. They're good, and another good win at FSU. And I tip my cap. Wake Forest is probably going to have to settle for a very good bowl game instead of competing for that college football playoff. What were your thoughts on this one?
So I was actually expecting a few more points in this one. I didn't necessarily have a lean on over or under because the number was pretty high. Wake, and just how FSU was playing it, Wake does a lot of safety option. You hear a lot about, like, read option. Well, one thing that Wake Forest does a lot of is a quote-unquote RPO while reading the safety. Is the safety going to come up in the box? Then they'll take a shot. If he's going to stay back, Hartman will hand the ball off, and just how they were defending that, Wake Forest ran the ball 51 times. In this game, which for a Wake Forest team, that's a lot, and a team that's known to put up a ton of points, specifically through the air. 51 rushes, that's a lot. With this one, I mean, too many missed field goals on both sides. That was one of the things that it's like some of these kickers, and I get it, it's college kickers, and you're missing. The FSU missed a 29-yard field goal. You can't be missing a 29-yard field goal as a Division I kicker.
Yeah, you would hope not, and that's something that your team is definitely counting on, especially when you get down into the red zone. You want to come away with at least 3, and to not be able to be consistent, and consistent kicking game can definitely separate the average teams from the good teams and the good teams from the very good, if not great teams. But once again, tip of the cap to Wake Forest.
Yeah, it's a nice team.
I don't have them downgraded much from even through their tough loss to Clemson. It's just going to be tough watching them be on the outside looking in and have no shot. You're a very good team and just have no shot to prove it to anybody.
Yeah, but that's why they're expanding the playoff.
Yeah, can, in my humble opinion, can't come soon enough. The last game that we want to do on the recap program for the HRO Sports Betting Podcast here is Washington at UCLA. I had the lean minus, I got there at -3. Actually got the it actually opened -1,
which is what I had it at.
exactly, and see, and with that, we'll go into it a little later on why you want to be able to bet these lines early and not listen to people who give you plays right before the game
day
starts,
of, or even
All
day
right,
before. I mean, the line.
It's just there's too much movement, you lose. But I got it in -3. Wouldn't have mattered. Tip my cap to UCLA. I really put too much credence in their game against South Alabama earlier in the year, where they won, but they didn't look so good. It was really, as I look back on it now, as a handicapper, an overreaction on my part. And those are things you really got to watch for when you're evaluating teams. I didn't have UCLA as a great team to begin with. I overreact to South Alabama game. Now I get a loss on this one based on that. Also, Washington, I tell you what, this really hurts me to say this, but I think Penix just lost any bid that he had at the Heisman. I mean, he was outside shot to begin with, but he just was not the game he needed to have. Couple interceptions, couple bad interceptions, and ends up being an L on the road for Washington. Knocks him out of the college football playoffs. Probably knocks him out of a chance to win a Pac-12 title, or at least dents those chances a lot.
They got to beat people.
And I got to start giving credit back to that UCLA program and the job Chip Kelly's doing there. How'd you see this one?
So I made this one Washington -4. As I mentioned, I got to the window with a unit on Washington -1 when it opened. I mean, the score was a lot closer than this game was.
Yeah.
I mean, fact of the matter is, Washington scored like 16 unanswered in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, scored one late to get
this
eight.
down to 8.
Yeah.
I mean, UCLA dominated this game.
Yeah.
Penix got. I mean, all year he's been fitting some passes into tight windows.
Not today.
In this game, they were picked.
Yeah.
UCLA did a good job defensively.
Yep.
DTR looked good. I mean, there were a couple clips, he was just making defenders look stupid. I mean, that one, when he was going into the end zone, where he literally made the two defenders ran into each other.
Well.
But he looked good through the air, on the ground, everything.
Yep. Give UCLA
credit to UCLA's offense. I mean,
yep.
500 total yards of offense against what was a solid defense.
Yeah.
In Washington to this point. Again, I mean, this game was never close. They were up like 40-16. It was this.
Yeah. Ball game was over. Washington makes a little bit of a comeback there, like you said, in the fourth quarter, but the game was never really that close.
No, it was done.
And credit to UCLA. They got the job done on it. It was Friday night, if memory serves me correctly, and sometimes you just got to tip your cap. You got to readjust where you're at, and you got to move forward. Yep. That's the life lesson I learned.
Yeah, I got burned a little bit on this one.
And you learn throughout the year as you're going. But these are some of the moves you have to make as a professional handicapper to understand that. You know what? Sometimes you got to adjust. If you're stubborn and you're handicapping, I could be stubborn and say, you know what? I really love that Kentucky team, or South Carolina for me early in the year. They're a top team, and you keep losing against the spread. It just costs you money being stubborn in this business. You got to be able to adjust, and you got to be smart enough to get these lines as early as you can. That's why we try and get this podcast out to you as early as we possibly can, so that you can get to the window and get a good number before it gets completely skewed and all the value gets taken out of it. And I think that's something you want to talk about a little bit.
I mean, one of the things that, and even like with losses, that one thing I do in a reflection is, was something a bad bet? Did I mess something up? Was something a bad beat? Or did the cards not go my way?
Yeah.
In this one, there probably wasn't enough value for me to bet this. I made it -4. I got it 1. I thought just because of key numbers there, I thought I had a decent look at it. I didn't. It was an undervalued mistake on my part regarding the Bruins. I mean,
Yeah.
they were better.
Yeah, they're
At
better.
home, I mean, it was maybe between the students that are now there, so their atmosphere was better.
be.
You don't hear the media talking. All you heard about for like the first 3 weeks of the year was how bad UCLA's attendance was.
Yeah.
And then, but nobody's talking about that when people actually showed up, because shocker, the students are in class.
Yeah.
Like, people are there, and even with UCLA, I mean, it's not the easiest or best
Not the-
located.
Yeah. Well,
But, I mean, this one was probably a mistake on my part. Obviously, hindsight being 2020, wish I didn't bet it because it lost. But you move on.
yep. And speaking of moving on, that's exactly what we're going to do here at the HRO Sports Betting Podcast studios. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to our recap show, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the window soon. Take care. Bye now.